briefings where first of all, we started by telling you about our preparedness for elections, and then we gave a situational report in the afternoon of Elections Day, and then in the evening we also gave you a more comprehensive report on the processes of elections. The following day we gave you our preliminary reports, which looked at the setup, the availability of materials, the voting processes, counting, and some of the incidents that had been reported by our observers. Now, during the presentation of the preliminary reports, we stated that our results for the parallel vote tabulation, the PVT, which we used to independently verify the accuracy of the results that were going to be presented by the Electoral Commission, were ready on our part, but by our protocols, we were going to wait till after the EC, who is constitutionally the only institution which is mandated to announce the presidential report, had done that before we come out to share our PVT estimates with you. So that is why we're here today. We would go straight ahead to hear from our acting co-chair, our acting chair of CODEO, Sheikh Aremiyao, who will tell us more about the PVT and also share the results with us. Thank you.
Before I go ahead, let me do some little acknowledgements. We have been joined here by Sharon Cromer, who is the USA Director. Probably show by hand and let's see you. Please, a round of applause for her. We have Philip Smith, Deputy Director. Good, thank you. And then we have, my very good friend, Dr. Chris Famunyo from NDI. Very good. Probably it will also be appropriate to also introduce the members of the advisory board who are here to lend support, as usual. We have Mrs. Elizabeth Villas, and then Mr. Frank Beecham, here. Mrs. Daphne Nabila, good. Ambassador Francis Chega is with us here. Reverend Dr. Fred Degbe, very good. And then we have Mrs. Susanna Sechere, very good. We have our CODEO coordinator, Mr. Albert Ahin, who has been doing a great job for us. On Sunday, December 6th, 2020, the Coalition of Domestic Election Observers, CODEO, in its press statement, communicated to the nation its intention to once again employ the parallel voter tabulation methodology to observe the 2020 presidential election, just as it did in 2008, 2012, and 2016. The PVT methodology is a reliable tool available to independent and nonpartisan citizens election observer groups around the world for verifying the accuracy of official presidential election results. In keeping with our protocols, which is that CODEO releases its PVT findings after the official results have been announced by the Electoral Commission, CODEO is here to release its PVT estimates for the presidential election. CODEO's PVT estimates for the presidential results form part of its comprehensive election observation activities for the 2020 elections that covered voter registration exercise, pre-election environment observation for 3 months, that is September to November, and election day observation. The PVT is an advanced and scientific election observation technique that combines well-established statistical principles and information communication technology, ICT, to observe elections. The PVT involves deploying trained accredited observers to a nationally representative random sample of polling stations.
They hear the thing for you.
On election day, PVT observers observe the entire polling process and transmit reports about the conduct of the polls and official vote counts in real time to a central election observation database using the short message service platform. The PVT technique has been deployed successfully around the world to promote electoral integrity and help defend the rights of citizens to vote and to protect such rights when exercised. The first PVT was conducted in the Philippines in 1986. Since then, the methodology has been employed in election observation in Bulgaria, Chile, Croatia, Guyana, Albania, Bangladesh, Belarus, Indonesia, Georgia, Macedonia, Slovakia, Montenegro, Nicaragua, Panama, Peru, and Ukraine. In Africa, the methodology has been deployed successfully in Madagascar, Malawi, Mozambique, Uganda, Burundi, Sierra Leone, Zambia, Ghana, Nigeria, Zimbabwe, Burkina Faso, Cote d'Ivoire, Kenya, and Tunisia. Unlike pre-election surveys which track voter intentions or exit polls which track voter recollections, the PVT is based on the actual behavior of electorates in an election. In other words, PVT observers do not speak to voters about the choices they made at the polls to produce the outcome of an election. Rather, after observing the entire voting and counting process, PVT observers record the official vote count as announced by election officials at polling stations and rapidly transmit this information to an observation center via coded text message. Consequently, the PVT data is collected directly from the polling stations. CODEO applied the PVT methodology for the first time in its election observation work in the year 2008 and has since used it in all subsequent presidential elections, including the current one. I mean, we have used it in 2012, 2016, and the current one, 2020. As presented in the tables 1 to 3, I mean, that will be shared with you. CODEO's previous PVT estimates of the presidential election results have been consistent with the official results announced by the EC in 2008, 2012, and 2016. The tables are within the appendix, which I'm sure will also be shared to you. Similarly, CODEO's PVT voter turnout and rejected ballot rate in the previous elections have also been consistent with the figures announced by the EC. For this year's case, by midnight of December 7, 2020, CODEO had received data of vote count from its 1,502 PVT observers who were deployed to a nationally representative random sample of polling stations located in every region and constituency of the country. CODEO, at this point, can confidently verify the outcomes of the presidential election results as announced by the EC. The findings presented in this statement are based on data received from all the 1,502 PVT polling stations across the 275 constituencies in the 16 regions of the country. The data was thoroughly checked for accuracy, internal consistency, and indeed integrity. The tables will also be shared with you. In general, each candidate's official results closely match the PVT estimate and falls within the estimated confidence of 95% range and the associated margin of error. Also, the PVT ranking of the presidential candidates based on their share of the valid votes received is largely similar to what was put out by the EC. I just give you maybe two examples. If you take the result that was provided by the EC, the presidential one, the EC official results gave the president-elect 51.302%, and our PVT estimate also put it at 50.98%, and so therefore there is some certain closeness in the figure. If you take that of the former president, John Dramani Mahama, that is NDC, the official EC results stood at 47.359%, and that of our estimate stood at 47.66%. And the rest can be found on the table as we shall make available to you. Aside the fact that the PVT estimates of candidates' vote share received generally match the EC's official results, the PVT estimated rejected ballots of 2.25% with a margin of error of plus minus 11% is also consistent with the EC's figure of 2.33%. The official voter turnout rate of 79% announced by the EC is slightly outside the PVT voter turnout confidence range based on the estimated turnout rate of 79.69% and the margin of error of plus minus 46%. The table will also be provided for you to see. It is worth noting, however, that this could be due to exclusion of the outstanding results from Techiman South constituency with a total number of 128,018 registered voters. To conclude, given that the official results announced by the Electoral Commission for each candidate falls within their respective PVT estimate confidence range, CODEO can confidently confirm that its PVT estimates are consistent with the official presidential election results. Not only do CODEO's PVT estimate match the official results of the EC, but our observers also reported that the two main parties, NDC and MPP, had party agents at over 99% of polling stations, and that both NDC and MPP party agents also signed the official declaration of polls and were given copies of those documents. Further, evidence from CODEO's PVT observers show that on December 7, 2020, voting and counting were conducted as per relevant electoral laws with no significant incidents related to the voting process. You remember we made this clear to you in our CODEO preliminary statement. In that statement, CODEO noted that the arrangement put in place by the Electoral Commission, from setup, voting, to counting of ballots at polling stations, were generally adequate and credible. In that statement, CODEO also projected a voter turnout and rejected ballot rates of approximately 80% and 2% respectively, which has been reconfirmed in today's statement of CODEO PVT estimates on the presidential results. Indeed, the Electoral Commission's official voter turnout and rejected ballot rates are largely consistent with the PVT projections. CODEO's pre-election environment observation reports also noted a generally peaceful electoral environment, with political parties focusing their campaigns on policy and development issues, with the exception of few incidents of use of abusive or inflammatory language recorded. Thus, CODEO's pre-election and election day observation reports, as well as our PVT data, should give Ghanaians confidence that the results declared by the Electoral Commission reflects how Ghanaians voted in the December 7 presidential polls. Accordingly, CODEO advises the contestants in the presidential elections, their supporters, and general public to place confidence in the official presidential results as declared by the Electoral Commission. We encourage any party or candidate with issues about the presidential results to peacefully resolve these through proper legal and procedural channels. CODEO appeals to Ghanaians to remain calm, law-abiding, and allow the system to work. CODEO further commends the maturity shown by Ghanaians throughout the voting, counting, and collating processes. CODEO deeply regrets the isolated cases of violence at some polling stations and constituency collation centers, which led to the loss of lives. CODEO expresses its condolences to the bereaved families and wishes the injured citizens speedy recovery. Ladies and gentlemen, please be assured that CODEO's comprehensive election observation activities are not yet over. CODEO will continue to observe the post-election environment and also organize a stakeholder review sessions to draw lessons from the just concluded 2020 elections to inform arrangements for future elections. On behalf of the Advisory Board of CODEO and all its member organizations, we would like to thank the thousands of Ghanaians across the country that volunteered to serve as non-partisan election observers and the technical team who worked tirelessly to protect the integrity of the December 7, 2020 polls. CODEO also commends the security agencies for their professionalism in maintaining peace during the voting, counting, and collation of results. The coalition acknowledges and commends other stakeholders, including other local and international observer groups and the entire population, for the high sense of comportment during the period of the elections. CODEO would also like to acknowledge the generous support of the American people through the United States Agency for International Development, USAID. The coalition further acknowledges the additional support of the Star Ghana Foundation with funding from the UK aid and the European Union. God bless our homeland, Ghana. Thank you so much. We will now be ready to take some of your questions. Let me remind you that this aspect of the work is very, very, very technical. And because of that, I have assembled the technical team in case there are areas that are very technical, then they are prepared to. So CODEO is here, and the aspect of the rejected ballots, which we mentioned, came to 2.25% with margin of error of plus minus 1.1. CODEO, is it 0.1? 0.11, yeah, 0.11%. It's also consistent with the EC's figure of 2.33%. Is zero? Is it 0.33? What I have here is 2.33%. Okay, so it's on the screen, so we can get the corrected one there. Good. All right. So can take your questions.
Okay, so my name is Edward Apa, reporting for the Daily Graphic. So the figure you showed us suggests that your figures are consistent with that of the EC. Would you be surprised if anybody says that the figures released by the EC is not a true reflection of what transpired on December 7th?
I mean, for us, we have used a very robust statistical approach to really get our figures. And like we said, these are reports on real votes that had been cast, based on which we received this information. So we will still maintain, in fact, we will maintain that our figures has accuracy. Except that, but we have mentioned to you that why we do the PVT is to really establish the accuracy and the correctness of what the EC puts in place. That is why, according to our protocol, we do not even go ahead to announce it. We only come out after. So if there's a deviation, we will actually put out our records. Yes.
Thank you very much. My name is Justus. I report for the Xinhua News Agency. I would like to believe that you also invited representatives of the various political parties to this event, because some of my questions are going to border on their claims and counterclaims. I, first of all, also want to believe that your agents were at every collation center throughout the country and actually did see the parties sign the collation sheets that were faxed to the EC. So there are claims here, and we have seen some photographic evidence of some of them, of certain collation sheets that were signed by only one party's agent that were delivered to the EC. For instance, in the morning yesterday, we were briefed that the agent for the NDC in the EC's collation room at the headquarters here was forcefully ejected at a point because he identified some of these collation sheets and was pointing them out. Then there are a number of them like that. For instance, in Akachi South constituency, the party agents reported with their collation sheet 32,000 plus votes for their candidate. But the EC's figure for the party's candidate was 29,000 votes. There are various transpositional errors that have been identified. If you independently look at the figures put out, you see places where the NDC candidate's results were rather given to the MPP candidate, and some of the time the percentages also were transposed with errors. Now, from a number of regions that we looked at with some friends of mine, about 7 regions that we looked at, the pink sheets that we saw, and then compared to what the EC's figures were, if these errors, and assuming that the pink sheets we saw were the true pink sheets that the parties claimed they had signed at the polling stations, then you saw the ruling party making a net gain of 132,000 votes from that error. And then the opposition party also making a net loss of that same margin, just from 7 regions. And so I would like to know whether your reporters, I mean your agents at the polling stations actually did fax copies of the pink sheets from the polling stations and the constituency collation centers. Because in one particular region, the opposition party reported that what they signed on with the regional collation officer is not what was faxed to the EC. So these allegations are there. Now also, you did mention that there were incidents of violence. Now, these incidents of violence did not happen in a vacuum. Some of them, you look at them critically, they were tailored along a particular pattern where lights went off suddenly at collation centers and reports of ballot boxes being pushed into the room, etc. And then people who were trying to prevent these, unfortunately, 6 lives, 6 Ghanaian lives have been lost in these activities related to the election and the election results that we have. These 6 lives that were lost, there should be some explanation for it. So, did your reporters actually fax the pink sheets that the parties signed on to at the polling stations and at the collation centers to your PVT tabulation center? Thank you.
Thank you. Respect to the details of the violence and what should be done, we do not have those details, and it's a matter for the security authorities to investigate and establish the causes and so on. As an election observer group, we only have a report about an incident, and we report on how many incidents have taken place. The details and what is the aftermath is not part of the, except that if we think it is going to affect, and you remember that in our preliminary statement we indicated there were incidents, but they were not as widespread as to affect the integrity of the elections. That was our preliminary statement that we gave. Our method, like I have stated, we have deployed 1,502 PVT observers. In other words, then they do not cover every polling stations. And the method is that they send us a report through the SMS as to what has taken place over there, because they have a checklist based on which they are able to transmit to us reports that we also analyze and put them together. So that is, and based on what we have received from them, we have done our analysis, and we maintain our position that what, according to our work, the figures that we have are correct. Good. Yeah, CODEO is here too also.
Thank you very much. I just wanted, because I think the questions that the gentleman raised are very, very valid, and we should try as much as possible to explain why we have confidence in the data and the accuracy of the PVT and our ability to confirm what the Electoral Commission has put out. So first of all, we collect our data straight from the polling station. We don't have anything to do with the collation process. And everybody understands that the polling station is the most accurate and easily verifiable data that you can get. It's, once the polls finish, it's publicly declared, it's pasted for everybody to see. Everybody hears about it, and they know what has happened in the polling station. So it is not affected by different channels of the collation process. So I think that is very, very important. And often, as we said, by midnight, December 7th, we had 100% reporting So even this is before a lot of the collation process even starts. The results were already there from the PVT. Secondly, we reported this in the preliminary statement that we issued was yesterday morning, that in all of the data that we received from the 1,502 PVT observers, 99% in all those cases, there were polling agents, party agents from the two main parties in 99% of the polling stations. Thirdly, in all of those cases, in 99% of the polling stations, the polling agents signed the declaration of results form from both parties. So that also gives us confidence in terms of the parties themselves accepting the polling station. And because we are taking it from the polling station, it gives it further confidence in doing that. The consistency checks we do for our system include looking at the results that are coming out from the independently results that the media is also collecting, which are being pasted and posted and communicated as the process is going on. So we check all of that to see if there are outliers, if there are inconsistencies that we have to use to check our data. So all of those consistency checks are there, and you can see that in all of the media results that are put in, everybody's around the same kind of process. And they are doing this in the open. It's a transparent process that everybody's collecting. So that's important. The last thing I want to say is that when we give you the data, you see our PVT results from past elections, from 2008. 2008, both the runoff is also there, 2012. We have used this method, and it has been accurate, dead accurate in all of those cases. So we don't have any concern about the data that we are getting. We know that the parties collect pin sheets, and so on. They all have the capacity to do that. So I have no doubt that when there's any confusion in any kind of particular results, both parties will be able to submit their pin sheets and so on. And an issue on the signing, we also know that in some cases parties don't sign, collation level and so on, for all reasons, and the law allows you to give a reason why you don't want to sign. So those things are all legitimate, but at least from the data we collected, in 99% of the polling stations where we collected our data, both parties signed the declaration of results form. Yeah. Okay, Ato.
Let me also add a little to what my colleague just said in terms of how confident we are in the results that we are putting up in terms of consistency with other analysis being done by other private and CSOs out there. In fact, in terms of our data, we had another group of observers who were not part of the PVT. That number is about 2,498. And when you run the analysis for that 2,498, it virtually gives you this same kind of results. So when you see that kind of trend, then you are sure that whatever you are putting out there is really, really consistent. And as my colleague said, we've cross-checked this against so many consistency tests that we normally do in terms of the graph. Even the regional analysis also appears to be quite consistent with what we are seeing from the EC. So I think, like my colleague said, because these data are coming from the polling stations, we are very, very sure we are giving out the right information. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, sir. It's because you mentioned the media bit that I wanted to ask a follow-up question, and then one more substantive question. Because in the media also, I am a media person, so I'll be the last person to try to run down my own colleagues. But we actually identified proven, errors in the reporting. The famous Kintamponov example is there for everybody to look at, and where, a figure of 17,000 for the president jumped to 27,000 for him in the media. So, and then there are some other errors like that. So, when you mentioned the media, did you also identify these errors that some of the media houses did report, and did you correct them? Now, secondly, too, there is this controversy about the parliamentary results, and you said your agents were there when all these declarations were made. At least by midnight, they had concluded everything. What is CODEO's own position on the parliamentary results that we received from the polling stations? Are there any outstanding in your books? Thank you.
Like we said, I mean, post the elections, we continue to really put our records together. But as long as what we have received from our 4,000 rapid response observers and 1,502 PVT observers are concerned, we have no, like our technical team have said, I mean, we are still confident that the records that we have, are correct, and we have no reason to really doubt what we receive from them at all.
Let me speak to the parliamentary results. In fact, when we send out the observers, they also provide us information on the parliamentary results as declared at the polling station. But one thing we must bear in mind, when you are dealing with statistics, you need some number in order to be sure of what you are predicting. But when you look at the presidential election, we consider the entire country as a unit. So the entire country is like a constituency. So that one, when you send out the observers some numbers in terms of the number of polling stations to the various constituencies, you can predict easily. When you come to the parliamentary one, assuming you are having just 2 polling stations in a particular constituency, you can really not use just the 2 polling stations to be predicting for the parliamentary candidate. It's very difficult because the numbers you'll be getting will not be scientifically good to be able to do any meaningful prediction with that. So we don't really focus so much on the parliamentary in terms of the PVT. The PVT is basically for us to verify the presidential results. So I think we should bear that in mind. If you make that attempt, you may be ending up in a situation you will not find yourself comfortable. So I think we should bear that in mind. Statistically, you can't do that. It becomes a big challenge trying to predict the parliamentary results with PVT.
Okay. Good morning to everyone. My name is Jifa from Ghana Press. Please, if I should be asking, in some constituencies, we heard some ballot boxes got banned, and other political parties took some secretly to go and vote. Okay, with that, how does it affect your results? Since it's 99%, okay, how does it affect your results, and how did you come out successfully with that? Because I know you are working with the EC, and we the media, we are also working with the EC, but we are also making sure we gather our information. So I want to ask very well, how did it affect the 99%, or it didn't affect the results?
Yeah, just let me correct. We do not work with the EC. We are an independent election observer group, and we do our work. And by the PVT, we only try to establish the integrity and accuracy of the results. And secondly, we have indicated that there were some incidents. But those incidents were not as widespread enough as to mar the. Yeah, so there was some reports, like the killings that we mentioned, attempt to snatch, which we mentioned in our preliminary report, attempted, snatching of a ballot box, and so on and so forth, which we mentioned. Yeah, but that the 99% was supposed to cover the 1,502 PVT observers that we put, and we were able to receive report from close to 100% of them, and that comes to that 99%. That's exactly what we mentioned. Yeah, Ato.
I think what we need to also bear in mind is that our PVT observers and even the ordinary observers, whenever they send information into our system, we also have those of you who came around during the setup time. You saw the data entry clerks. Their role specifically was to call these observers and verify whatever information. So even in terms of the incidents, we call and we verify. So this is how come we reported some in our preliminary statement that these things happen. But we also have to bear in mind the fact that PVT is based on the actual vote counts. So if these things even happen and we went ahead and counted the votes and then the agents certified it, there is no way we will throw that data out. We will still use that data. So that is something we should bear in mind. And personally, from what I saw, most of these challenges rather came up at the collation centers and not at the polling station. So we are collecting the data from the polling station. So we are very, very sure of what we are presenting. We are very sure, whereby my colleague said agents, 90% of MPP, 90% of NDC, they signed the results form before our observers reported the figures to us. So these are, in fact, when you look at the checklist, it's a condition. They don't just report any figure to us. They wait, get the results counted, confirmed and signed by the agents and endorsed by the presiding officers before they transmit the information to us. And then we also call back to verify and be sure that whatever they have recorded is the exact figure they are reporting to us. So we go through a whole lot of process before we come to this point. Thank you.
Sure, good morning. My name is Salom Bobiji. I work with a Finder newspaper. My question is a bit tangential, but I'll ask nonetheless. You talked about organizing a stakeholder review to presumably make some recommendations to the EC. Yesterday, the European Union Election Observer Mission said that in the last election, 2016, they had made some 20 recommendations, out of which about 5 had been partly implemented. Can you tell us how many recommendations you made in the last election and how much of those recommendations were implemented and how those have impacted on the conduct of the 2020 election? Thank you.
Well, I'm not sure whether I'll be able to tell you offhand how many recommendations we made, but for me, the important thing is that actually we did a post-election review workshops with all stakeholders, and out of which lessons could come out for us to. I mean, one of the things that we did that has to do with rejected ballots, for example, is one of the things that we did some research in order to understand why the trend is so that we could assist in advising what can be done to reduce the occurrence of the rejected ballots. So this time too, similar to will be done, and we'll look at some of the challenges, but including some of even the conflicts that are coming up, and understand them very well and see what recommendations we could make to the EC or to other, including security matters, if we could make recommendations to ensure that we can have an election without necessarily having somebody to lose his life. All right. Do I assume that there's no more question? Okay. Then we can thank you for coming.